Hello, this is Hammersmith Chess Club, Junior Hour Basics in 5 minutes or so. This video is the summary of a session we had in June 2020 on the Rooks. The Rooks were in former times in different countries also called chariots, as we see here, or elephants, towers, castles, and I think the name castling, where king and rook exchange their positions, comes from that time. Now, in a previous session on openings, we had seen that at the end of the opening, be it part of the opening, be it beginning of the middle game, the rook starts to come into play. So this is an idealistic development of the white pieces. Just ignore the black pieces. They would never move in this sequence, where here the opening is more or less finished. The queen is developing, is moved. So the rooks are connected. This is one important element, very common as a theme at the end of the opening. And then the rooks are moved to where there are open files, half open files, or where pawns are to be pushed, like here, D and E, the central pawns. So this is very typical to bring the rooks to the center, and then finally the middle game starts. Now I will show a few examples, and you can always stop the video and should do it when you want to understand the position. Look at what you would think the next move would be in order to get more of this short video, because the time may be too short of this video to just understand everything immediately. Okay, so we see a few exemplary games where the rooks are in the middle game developed. As I said, after the opening, you bring the rooks to the open files. So this is a typical development. The D file is half open. There is still a pawn, a black pawn on the file, but the rook already exerts pressure on the D file. Just look at how the continuation is for white. And of course, the rook always is present, exerting pressure on the pawn D5. And finally, in this game, actually, the pawn is won and the rook establishes itself on D5. Now that is not the end. The second rook comes into the game. It's a double rook on the open file. Now it's fully open. Black is unable to counter with a rook on the D file. And before black knows what's going on, the rook is attacking the queen on the 7th rank, because that's important. Rook on the 7th rank, and even offering a queen, but white will not accept the queen sacrifice because it would have to give its 2 good rooks away. Now indeed the queen has to move out, and ultimately queen h6, knight g5 in a different arrangement. Could be queen c7, maybe knight e5, knight e4. So there might be mating on the king's side, and black resigned here already. Here is another game. This time it's black putting the rook on the 7th rank. I mean, it's on the open file. White also has the rook on the open file, but black's is early on the 7th rank. As I mentioned, the 7th rank, I mean, you occupy the open file in order to ultimately, in the ideal case, bring the rook to the 7th rank from your side. So black's 7th rank is then the 2nd rank for white. So here, rook c2, 7th rank, exerting pressure on the 2nd rank of the defender. Black actually is Bobby Fischer. And we see the further development. Where the 2nd rook is brought to an open file and then also to the 2nd rank. So this is a very powerful combination. 2 rooks on the 7th rank. And indeed then a pawn will fall and the whole position, the whole white structure will collapse and white resigned. Another example, at the moment there is no open file yet, but white opens the A file. There is only a white rook on the A file and comes to the 7th rank immediately, so that black doesn't have time to put his rook on A8 and to counter on the A file. Now there is threat to take on C7. White continues, and white does not exchange the heavy pieces on the A file, but offers to sacrifice or sacrifices the queen. Black has to capture the queen. So currently white only has a rook and a bishop for the queen, but of course one rook is on the 7th rank already and threatening to take all the pieces there on the 7th rank. Indeed, black decides not to defend, it would be in vain, but to search, to seek counterplay, but it's too late. Look at this rook, I mean, starting A1, A7, C7, D7, F7, G7, and now it's just too late. The second rook will enter the 7th rank, and with the 2 knights, together with the 2 knights, will deliver checkmate soon, and black resigned. Another example, here we are already far into the middle game. White is dominating, it's clear, has the initiative, and now just another few moves and black's fate is sealed. The rook, they have a piece on the 7th rank, and of course alone it cannot checkmate, we have seen this earlier, but together with the queen in this case. So for the queen to come over to G6 ideally, white sacrifices a knight, and now after queen G6 there will be mate, and black resigned. Final example for a rook on the 7th rank, another game of a world champion we had seen before, games of Bobby Fischer, of Petrosyan, now of Capablanca. As white, he didn't put the rook on the 7th rank because there can be bishop c6, the rook might be captured and the queen cannot forever defend the rook. So here he exchanges, offers to exchange, black accepts the exchange, the queen, but this rook is now unbeatable. Of course, there was the threat of knight g5, knight f7 or e6. h6 tries to prevent this, but then indeed the rook on the 7th rank can take one pawn, and you see that now the attack starts of the white knights against the kingside position of black. Indeed, the pawn on g6 can be taken, the pawn f7 is pinned by the rook on the 7th rank, and f7 falls, so game is over actually. There is a mating net. Black has to give the exchange. It doesn't help because the black king can leave his prison there, but will be pushed closer and closer to white's position, and after knight g2, mate with knight f4 is not possible to be prevented by black, so black resigned. So we have seen how the rooks are brought into the game from the opening. We have seen how the rooks are developed in the middle game, open files, moving in the open files ideally to the 7th rank, if possible even doubling the rooks on the 7th rank, and then finishing on the 7th rank. Now this is the ideal, it doesn't always work. Let's go to the end game where white in this case has an advantage of one pawn. It's a rook endgame, and there is one principle. It is not applicable in all situations, but very, very often rooks belong behind passed pawns. If you have a passed pawn, don't bring your rook in front of the passed pawn, and this principle is the same for the attacker as the defender, but bring your rook behind the passed pawn. So in this case, even white retreated his king. It took a few moves to reposition all the pieces of white, even sacrificing a pawn on the king side, running with a pawn, and now is the time to bring, before black is able to bring the rook behind the passed pawn, it's white to bring the rook behind the passed pawn, and it's impossible for black to defend against this, and soon the game is over because black cannot capture the pawns on the king side and white will win with the rook. So we have a last example from the endgame. We had seen an endgame from the side of the attacker with the principle bring your rook behind the passed pawn. Now the same principle I said is true for the defender. Also here the defender has to bring the rook behind the passed pawn, so it's not good to bring your rook from c4 to c6 to a6, because then white will ultimately win with bringing his king forward and pushing the rook back. So here the solution to draw, even with the pawn down, is to bring your rook behind the passed pawn, and then it's relatively easy in this position to draw, because if white would try to defend the pawn laterally with the rook, then white can just not proceed. So ultimately white might win a pawn on the king side, but this endgame without a passed pawn, just 4 pawns against 3 pawns who are connected, is a sure draw, especially the white king is not active and can be prevented from entering the game. So principle in the endgame, a very important principle to learn. In most positions, it's true, bring your rook behind the passed pawn. And with this, we end the session on the rooks. And as we have seen in so many cases, the rook is not just a tower, it's not a fortress, it's not a castle, it's indeed much more resembling a chariot. Very active piece in the middle and especially in the end game, moving around the whole board. That's how you should use the rooks, very active.